I've watched your interview with Dr. Sean Baker, and
Yes.
it was such a great interview. I enjoyed it so much. And like I said previously in videos that I made about this discussion that we're having now, it's always an honor for me to talk to medical professionals like yourself. And from what I've learned about you in the videos that I've started to look at what you made even 4 years ago, is that you are very passionate about health. But what I like about your approach is that you include nutrition.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for my listeners, this is going on YouTube, and I'm talking to Eric, who I know as Regenerarian.
The Regenerarian, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Passionately committed to regenerative agriculture. That's what that's about.
Yes. I want to swing back to that topic a little bit later on if we have time, because that is very interesting, but we'll absolutely get to that. But you have not been a professional nurse all your life, have you?
No, I started, let's see, I was an electrician for 14 years before retiring to become a nurse. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have experience in the trades, you know, working with my hands, building things, just kind of typical blue collar stuff.
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah.
And if I may ask, what made you pursue a medical profession?
Actually, before being an electrician, I thought I wanted to go into ministry as like a pastor, as a Christian back in the day. So I thought, okay, I'm just getting into the electrical work for a little while until I get the ball rolling. Well, you can call me a Bible college dropout because I didn't continue down that path. I decided I wanted to be working with people in an environment where they need somebody who cares. So I have one of my strengths is that I can be very empathetic and warm and caring. I can be in a very intense environment where people might be dying, they might be in extreme pain, excruciating news that they found out, maybe they just got cancer. I can be present in those situations and offer comfort and warmth and empathy and care. And then I also have the ability to walk away from that and not keep that stress with me. You know, I know somebody else just had the worst day in their life, but I can actually walk away from that with peace in my heart that I know that my doing the best that I can is great, but I can't, I'm not tied to their outcomes, you know, as far as like, I don't take it on so emotionally. So it puts me in a unique position to be able to tolerate some of the most difficult situations that can happen in a hospital. And so that's where my strength is. So I decided to go into nursing for that reason.
Sure. It's great. And what I've learned from your interviews and so forth, I've learned that you were in critical care and trauma.
Yes.
You're a trauma nurse as well. Yes.
Yeah.
And
so I'll have to qualify that. In the emergency department, I don't do trauma.
Yes.
That's a special training, but I was trauma trained for the ICU. So that was, there's an initial phase of trauma care. So after the emergency department stabilizes people, they come up to us and we monitor them really closely. And then also neurological stuff. So we had a lot of people who came and had tumors removed from their brains. They had aneurysms. They had drains, pressure monitoring in their skull. A lot of stuff like that requires very close monitoring and exceptional care. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. And then you received an award for extraordinary nursing.
Yes, correct. So it's called the Daisy Award. I've been nominated a number of times, and the nominating committee chose me. It was so I was awarded the Daisy Award for, the situation was, it was the middle of one of the COVID surges in our ICU. One of our Navajo friends came down to our ICU from the reservation up north. So he was very far away from his family. We weren't allowing visitors. There's a lot of stress with the family members. And I always try and ask, how can I bring you into the room? How can I bring your family into this room for this patient? Because he's lonely, he's here by himself. It's incredibly difficult to go through this alone. And the gal said, can you just make him a cup of coffee and bring it in the room so maybe he can smell it? He'll know that's us because we know he drinks his coffee every day. So that's what I did. Every day that I had him, I made a cup of coffee. I bring it in the room. I put it kind of in a spot where it would be safe, but just to let the smell go in the air so that he could smell that, so he could hopefully feel the presence of his family who couldn't be with him. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff I like to do.
Yeah. And, you know, the difference that you make for people on that level is incredible. And that's also why I wanted to do this interview with you, because I work with nurses. I'm also in the medical field, but in sales. So I'm in marketing. And out of the nature of my work, I speak to a lot of health professionals, professional nurses, even doctors, and in many cases that they are ill themselves, they're metabolically ill. But on the other hand, they are giving out advice for people, and the advice is detrimental in many cases. You know, I always refer to this one particular example of a lady that her own husband got diabetes, but she's a professional nurse. She's qualified in diabetes care. And I asked her, because her husband passed away from diabetes. He lost a limb before. He lost his kidneys, and he died from heart disease because of type 2 diabetes complications. So I asked her, what kind of food are you giving diabetics? And she said, no, a lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables with a lot of fiber. You know, and yet we are burying people, you know, or they are burying people. And I said very politely to her, you know, you can reverse type 2 diabetes. Do you know this? That you can reverse it with a low carbohydrate diet, like the carnivore diet, you know? Yeah. And many of the nurses know this, you know? But this is my question actually to you tonight. Why don't they tell people at least, you know?
Well, you have to believe that it's possible to tell somebody that. I've asked hundreds of patients the same question. Almost every patient that I get who has type 2 diabetes, I ask the question in the same way. I always say, hey, while we're on the topic of diabetes, I just want to ask, you know, have you ever had a doctor, a nurse, any diabetes educator offer you the information that your diabetes may be reversible and that there are ways that you can do that? And I've, in my whole career, have had maybe 3 people say yes, that they understand it's reversible. They're just having a hard time reversing it. And I would say for everyone else, it's new material. So you can add me to the list of nurses who tell people that diabetes is reversible at the bedside at the moment when I have their full attention about their diabetes care. And then I say, yeah, there's lots of different ways. And I tend to take when I'm in the hospital, I say, look, because I can't give medical advice. I say, look, here's how I see people reversing type 2 diabetes. Strict calorie management and exercise, okay? That's hard. A lot of people fail at that. I see people go low carb, ketogenic, carnivore diet. I see people do intermittent fasting. there are things that you can do to reverse the disease. And I would just offer to you the invitation to take responsibility for yourself, find a provider who understands how to do that, and work with them to reverse your diabetes. And I've had friends do that and get off of all kinds of diabetes medications very safely. You know, there are some concerns if you're on a medication already, that if you start a low-carb, ketogenic, or fasting type of diet plan, that your blood sugar can go too low, and that's something we don't want to encourage. We want people to have the information on how to do it safely, which is why I try and tell them, find a provider who knows how to do this, because there are a lot in my city where I'm at in Phoenix, Arizona. So yeah, and I love seeing people get off their meds. It's one of the, it's like type of party. It's a good time.
For sure. And I want to agree with what you just said. When I tell people also about the carnivore diet and that you can reverse type 2 diabetes with it, I tell them they must talk to their healthcare provider. They must talk to their doctor for the very reason that you've said just now. Because if they don't, and they eat a low carbohydrate diet or cut out all carbohydrates for that matter, of course their blood sugar will fall, and you know, apart from that, the medicine will be too strong. And that is the trouble, even with hypertension and all those kinds of medicines. In every video that I make, at the bottom of the video, I've got a certain area where I put a tag and I say, consult your doctor.
Yeah.
So this is, yeah. And that's what I always want to do, Eric, is I just want to share the information. That's why I'm so grateful to talk to you, because like I said, when I started to watch your videos going back even 4 years, that's also what you do. You want to share the information as you learn. And that's why I respect you so much, because you are willing to change your opinion as you learn more, you know, and as you experience in your own body. For instance, like you said, I think you're a 1 year carnivore now.
Yes. And if you went far enough back in my social media content, you'll see I was very plant-based, very much, you know, believing that the Mediterranean style diet, something with more of a plant slant, was definitely the healthier way to go. It wasn't until I tried the carnivore diet for myself and experienced all the health benefits that it made sense to me. Because prior I really thought it was crazy and dangerous, to be honest. You know, it's neither of those things. It's, you know, it's just, I don't know how I don't know how you can feel this good and say there's something bad about it. My general shortcut for health is, if it makes you feel better, if all of your systems are working well, if your digestion's good, your oral health is good, your mental health is good, it's got to be good. And if there's any risk with heart disease and that kind of stuff that goes along with this that may or may not be present, then I'm okay with taking that. You know, I'd rather not be depressed. That's the thing. I'd rather live fewer years without depression than live a long, you know, drawn out depressed life. You know, I'm 100% in on this.
For sure. I want to ask you because I want to talk about depression as well. But apart from the depression, what other things that you managed to get improvements on in your health? And were you keto before, or that you? Because I was, for instance, I was vegan, and I went straight into carnivore, which is quite a strange move, actually. Yeah. So what was your journey? If you can just summarize it for us.
Yeah, sure. So I was mostly plant-based. I didn't like keto. I tried keto. Keto never worked for me, and I'm very glad that it works for a lot of people. But for me, it just there were too many options. You know, the keto peanut butter cups and the keto cakes, and And I just found that all those things just weren't really good for my digestion. That was my experience. A lot of people love it, and I think we're all different. But I was trying to go the route of intermittent fasting. I even developed an intermittent fasting protocol that tracked ketones instead of blood sugar. I called it Eat, Deplete, Repeat, and I have a whole website, and I've got a Facebook group for people who want to use the method to try and find how their body interacts with sugars, basically. And so I was trying really hard not to go keto because it just wasn't working. But then carnivore is extremely simple. It's a very simple form of keto. And I love the simplicity. I love the discipline of it's just mostly water, salt, and meat. It's easy to cook for myself now. I'm not making all these elaborate recipes to try and get in all of my micronutrients and all that kind of stuff. I can just literally eat beef every day, and I feel great. So yes, I hope that answers your question.
It does. Well, I just want to, because I found a video of yours talking about EDR, but in the video I sort of figured out that it's more to do with keto than with carnivore. But because that's about 3 years ago that you made that video. But I was just wondering if that would be anything applicable to carnivores, because as we are not consuming carbohydrates really.
So absolutely. When we started the experiment, there were about 20 of us who all decided to start the experiment at the same time. You become really tuned into how your body utilizes glucose. So I would eat to start you fast, right? So in order to deplete, so it's eat, deplete, repeat. So eat a meal, whatever meal you want. You choose, it could be junk food, garbage, whatever. How long does it take to get back into ketosis, to where you start producing ketones again? And that to me is kind of a proxy for my liver glycogen's depleted, my body's at that stress level where it needs more fuel, and now I'm going to eat again. But you're eating with a depleted liver, okay? Your liver is theoretically on a lower level of glycogen saturation. So when you do eat, most of your food starts to go into your liver first, and then, it's just easier to regulate. But we had a girl go carnivore during the middle of the experiment. And at first I was a little annoyed because she was like, Eric, it's just so much easier. You just eat meat. And I'm like, I didn't like to hear that because I wanted my experiment to work out. And I think it definitely can work for people who want to find their own way, because not everybody's going to find their way to carnivore. But that's actually one of the things that led me to carnivore, was just in the back of my mind for the couple of years after that, thinking, well, maybe it could just be as easy as just eating meat and not tracking anything. And I found that to be true.
Yeah, that is great. And then the reason why I also want to ask you about intermittent fasting and perhaps other advice or tips that you can give regarding weight loss stall on the carnivore diet. We had a couple of our followers and friends that they lost weight, and then at a certain stage they seem to not lose weight anymore. And I always try to encourage them. I've got videos about weight loss stall, like about the thyroid and about high uric acid levels, but you can elaborate on if you have any other information. What is your opinion about weight loss stall, specifically related to something like the carnivore diet? I know you mentioned something about that in one of your videos where you talked about the survival mechanism, and you can elaborate on that if you like, but what is your take on that?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I First of all, I try and set realistic goals. For myself, when I talk to people, I like to communicate that the number on the scale, first of all, isn't necessarily anything to be concerned about. You want to look at body composition, and for me, you want to look at functionality. How does your body function? Does your body function in the way you want it to? Do you need to go up 10 flights of stairs? Do you need the muscle mass to do that? Are you functional in life? To me, that's fine. We know that a moderate amount of exercise, 3-4 times a week, no matter what shape you're in, is going to increase your cardiovascular health, and it's going to be good for you. So to me, losing weight could be either losing muscle or losing fat. If you want to lose the extra fat, if you're concerned that you've got extra fat, I think it's going to be a long uphill battle, to be honest, when people stall. And because historically our bodies are regulated by the theory is the body fat set point theory. So once you accumulate a certain amount of fat in your body, your hormones are kind of regulating where you're at. And most people's best efforts to go against that are very stressful. So it's very hard to go against a physiological process that's going on in your body. So I actually encourage people to accept their body shape as it is, and to hopefully kind of remove the stigma of having different body shapes. Because honestly, I don't know that it's actually beneficial to get to the point where you have six-pack. If you're not the type of person, that type A personality who's going to be in the gym 6-7 days, 6 days a week, and always tracking their macros or tracking their calories and stuff like that. I think it takes a lot to do that. And I think what the carnivore diet does is it shifts probably your body's ability to create certain hormones that probably make you feel better, give you more motivation, more energy, that kind of thing. So when you make that shift to a new dietary pattern, it can give you an advantage. Like, you're going to lose some water weight, you're going to shed some glycogen, you're going to shed some adipose tissue. But if you get to that point where you stall, my personal opinion is I don't know there's much else you can do just from a purely dietary perspective. I always remind people you've got to have your thyroid's got to be functioning well. All your other organ systems need to be functioning well. So work with your doctor to make sure you don't have any of those things going on. That can be very common in women, postmenopausal women, or men with low testosterone. That kind of hormones get all funky, and it makes it tough. On a carnivore diet, the extra fat and cholesterol interacts with your DNA in such a way that it will make you feel younger and more rejuvenated and have more motivation and better, less depression and stuff like that. So I tell people, when you feel those things, act on them. If you feel this feeling like you need to go exercise, go do it, and build those positive experiences doing activity. Because for a lot of us, who have that stubborn extra body fat, a lot of times it can be that we're just not active enough. We don't have to be active. We don't have to go hunt our food anymore. The freezer and the refrigerator are right there. So it's a matter of your environment. I tend to believe that your body weight is going to find a different set point depending on your environment. So let's say there was a zombie apocalypse and we had to go live out in the forest and hunt for ourselves. Our bodies would naturally find a new body weight set point, or new body fat set point. If I were to be working at a donut shop, I might start to gain a little more, unless I completely abstain from that kind of stuff. Or, so I think your food environment, your activity environment plays a big role in that. But I would rather encourage people to get the stress out of your life, because that may actually be the reason why you're holding on to stubborn body fat. And if you're stressing about it so much, that's releasing possibly stress hormones that make it hard to release the weight, So
Yes.
experiment with intermittent fasting, experiment with adding more fat to your diet if you're carnivore, because a lot of people make the mistake of eating too much protein on carnivore, and then that ends up not being necessarily an anabolic diet, and ends up being that ends up not being a catabolic diet, which is breaking down of the fat. It ends up being anabolic, or it ends up stalling plateaus. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And if I can quote what you've said in one of your videos, you said, "We are built for survival."
Yeah, yeah. And deep, it's not even really deep in our DNA. It's kind of right on the surface.
Yeah.
From our taste buds to the way that our hormones react when we have a blood sugar spike. If you look at the evolution of our species of humans, Homo sapien, about 2 million years ago, we had common ancestors with the other primates that have survived and found evolutionary niches to occupy in the world today. We were eating a lot of fruit. The earliest humans and pre-humans were eating a lot of fruit. And so, and they had very little body fat. So they had to have the internal mechanisms in their system to eat, because you got to make sure you're eating enough and storing a little bit of body fat for when there isn't any food. And we see the transition from earlier primates to Homo sapien. Homo sapiens, of all the primates, have a massive amount of body fat, even when they're thin, compared to other primates. And that's because I believe we probably spent a lot more time not eating, because the foods that we began to eat, for instance, the woolly mammoth, larger fatty ruminants, ox and, cows and different bison and all that kind of stuff with the big fat humps. This is where we got our fuel after we transitioned. The more human we became, the less plants humans ate. And that's scientifically verifiable in the archaeological record by nitrogen, sulfur, and carbon radioisotopes, that we were eating almost all meat at some point before the agricultural revolution. And so we have this drive to eat, and especially when we eat carbohydrates, it sets off a cascade. If you'll notice, whenever you eat carbohydrates, about 3 or 4 hours later, you're hungry again. You get that signal, like, hey, it's time to eat again. Yes. That's because when the fruits are ripe, you got to eat them all. You got to eat them all because they might not be ripe in a little bit, and you're competing with all the other primates around you. So you better get yours in while you can. It's
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I always say is that the reason why people are fat is because of fridges. Because you can eat fruit and vegetables for 365 days of the year.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's the problem. Yeah, and just to put my 5 cents in about the weight loss stall.
Yeah.
Insulin resistance can be experienced, I've learned, even on a low carbohydrate diet, if you have high uric acid levels and if you eat too much salt. Okay. And that's something I've only learned this year from Dr. David Perlmutter. It's video number 12 on my blog. Yeah, and another thing that I've learned from Kelly Hogan, who is a 13-year carnivore now, is that you have to be patient. And that's why I want to bring it back to what you've said in that video that I quoted. We are built for survival. And I think that is what you are being saying the whole time now, is that the most important thing for your body is to survive. It is not to have the six-pack or whatever the case might be.
True.
And I know there are some of my friends that, we communicate and they say, but I'm struggling now. And they seem to stagnate. And what I want to say to them is just be patient. Look at those things. Look at, as Eric said, look at your hormonal panel. Discuss it with your doctor. I've got videos about that. I don't want to elaborate on that specifically now because else the video will be too long. But exercise, like Eric said, is very good because then it works against insulin resistance because your cells don't need insulin for the glucose to be utilized when you exercise. So exercise is good, even on the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
Eric, you are in Arizona.
Yes.
Aren't you?
Phoenix, yeah. Arizona. Yeah, I live in a hot desert.
My goodness. But it's quite a big city, isn't it?
Oh, very large. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. 6, 7, 8 million people. Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's just a massive amount of urban sprawl. It's just, you know, there are some taller buildings, you know, like New York City and London and Tokyo, stuff like that, but not even close. They try and keep limits on how tall buildings can be around here, but so what's happened is everybody's just gone way out. I think the total, you know, square miles of the Phoenix metro area is bigger than some states, some of the smaller states on the East Coast. It's huge. Yeah.
Sure. And is there a lot of, I guess there's not a lot of farming area around there. It's just urban, all of it for miles and miles and miles.
You know, the Colorado River doesn't go too far from here, and the Salt River has always fed this area, actually down near Tempe, Arizona, which is in the Phoenix metro area. There were indigenous people who actually created the system of canals. And so this was actually habited before Europeans arrived. And so it actually started out as an agricultural community because the industrial agricultural model works really well here because you don't need really good soils because you can spray, you know, chemicals and that mitigates the poor soils that we have here. But there's always been citrus farming, cotton, cattle, copper was a big thing here in Arizona, copper mines all over the place. So there's actually a very long agricultural heritage here where there were more farms than anything before it started urban sprawl, but then now all the farms are getting bought out. So the farms are further out on the outskirts of the city. And then there's cattle ranchers everywhere. You can throw goats and cows on pasture in the scrubs and, you know, different types of, areas here because we do get wild grasses and it's just not as common.
I see. And tell me about the regenerative farming that you are involved with.
Yeah, so I try to live in a way that it takes into consideration not just my health, but the environment. You know, what are our impacts? I think these conversations are trendy these days. A lot of people are very scared about climate change. And what I found is that it's possible to eat beef and not be contributing to climate change. If you believe climate change is a very serious problem, and if you believe that, you know, methane from cow burps is a really big problem, which it's a small part of the problem, but it's not the big problem. Then what I try and do is I try and support farmers who utilize regenerative agriculture practices. And what that means is they stop sterilizing the soil. Most crops are grown in dirt. It's dirt, and then they spray chemicals to make it grow. But if you can create soil, and it's a different thing, when you can create soil, what you'll end up having is you'll have this 4 foot, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 feet. As you regenerate the soil, you're creating soil organic matter, You have soil, fungi, mycorrhiza, bacteria, little spiders, little beetles, little nematodes, all kinds of life, right? So when I look at soil, soil is its own ecosystem, and it's a life-giving system for everything above it, because these microbes and these smaller little insects, they interact with the roots of the plants that we put in the ground to eat, to create food, and they actually make the food better, more nutritious. It breaks down different minerals and vitamin type molecules to be able to be absorbed. And so then whether you're growing plants or you're grazing ruminants, you're going to have better food. And I think that's part of what's causing people to also, be, obese, type 2 diabetes, all of these diseases of excess food consumption, because I think we're not getting the vitamins and minerals. And I do not believe that a daily multivitamin pill is as good as eating the highest quality foods with the highest nutrition density, with the highest bioavailability, digestibility, and assimilatability. All these things need to work together, and that's when you stop being hungry all the time, because your body isn't looking for all the micronutrients. It's satisfied. And that's just a heuristic that I use that helps me kind of generalize, but I think it's helpful. And the amount of carbon that gets put into the soils with regenerative agriculture, you're able to create your own nitrogen. There's tons of nitrogen in the atmosphere, and yet farmers are spraying nitrogen fertilizer that comes from petroleum from the earth. So why extract petroleum from the earth when it's in the air? Why not take it from the air, put it in the soil? And you can do that. You can do that by planting legumes. You can do that by planting daikon radishes. There's all these different plants that you can put in that'll get the nitrogen in the soil, and it'll bring more carbon, and it'll bring everything you need. So
yes.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Carl Hammer? Carl Hammer, Karl Hammer. He's in Vermont.
No,
he's in regenerative farming. He's got chickens.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. He's got 600. Yeah, he's on YouTube. You must check him out. He's got 600 chickens. And,
oh my God.
And it's for laying eggs. And the interesting thing that I picked up there is that his chickens actually produce less eggs than the commercial, stations, I would say. So it's about half. You get about half. But what he does is he's got compost heaps, and that's all that he feeds those chickens. You get about 2.5 pounds of food scraps, kitchen scraps that he gets from hotels, etc. And he put it on this heap, and then the chickens just go and eat on that heaps, and they eat the insects and the worms that are there, and of course some of the scraps. And but the interesting thing is that his chickens live for 6 years, and the typical life cycle, if you can trust the Google machine, for a typical laying hen is about 11 months. In commercially. But in one of his videos, he said that these hens become 6 years old, So it's interesting.
Yeah, in commercial operations, I'm sure they cull. They'll cull the hens after their production drops, just because they don't want, they don't want a hen there feeding a hen that's not producing an egg every day. So I can see that. But in doing backyard farming, even though I do feed my chickens some grain products, they can live 4 or 5 years if they don't get heat stress and that kind of stuff. So if you treat them right, they can have a really nice life, before they die, especially the hens. Yeah. Yes.
I thought that was quite interesting. I want to swing a little bit back to depression, and I want to tie it up with eating off plan, because sometimes people start on a carnivore journey and then they get some benefit, but then they start to eat off plan, and then sometimes they lose some of the benefits that they got. Do you have any experience in that, or what is your opinion about cheating, for instance, on the carnivore diet?
Yeah, I like to call them excursions. Here, you take an excursion. But I also have a philosophy. If you look at people's behavioral patterns, most people can be really strict for a short period of time, and then they become less strict. So I actually build into my mindset that there will be times when I'm more strict and less strict, so I don't beat myself up about it. Bodybuilders call it bulking, right? So when you're bulking, you're eating all the stuff, and then when you're cutting, for like competition, that's when you get real strict. So I like to say, if you're going to first start the carnivore diet, at least go 3 months strict, and you'll get some benefits, okay? And you're going to like those benefits because they're going to feel good. I mean, this is general, not for everybody, obviously, not medical advice. But if you were to choose to do that on your own, you're going to get some benefits. But then you have to remember, and I call it expansion and consolidation. Have expansion and consolidation built into your plan, because it's reality, because that's what everybody does. Because no matter how hard you try and fight against it, you're not going to fight against it. You're going to lose, and then you're going to be mad at yourself. So if you just build that into your plan, then you can say, look, I'm doing what I should. So give yourself a little excursion. That's your expansion, and then consolidate again and come back. I like to say, do it strategically. If you want to try the cake and ice cream at your child's birthday party, like I would, see how that feels, okay? Having been fully carnivore for 3 months, you're going to feel some effects of different foods when you try them. Be aware, be mindful. How does that make you feel? Do you find yourself depressed over the next few days? Do you find yourself having digestion discomfort? Those kinds of things. And just be aware. And just being aware of what's happening with your body, I think, is the most important thing. And then once those effects wear off, say, okay, now if I choose this excursion in the future, now I'm choosing that with the knowledge, experiential knowledge of what happens when I do that. And I think that's just a very practical way to, experience life, and food's a necessity. So what does it feel like? I've tried potatoes, for instance. After about 3 months of being fully carnivore, I said, the one thing I'd like to bring back is potatoes. Let's see if I can bring it back. And my experience on potatoes is digestive discomfort, lower back pain. I get the feeling of the arthritis that, my 44-year-old body wants to have. And so then now I make my choices. Do I want to feel the arthritis pain and have digestive discomfort or not? And it's all about choices and consequences. I don't talk about, stick to the plan and stuff like this. It's choices and consequences. What do you want out of life? Experiment and see, make a choice, see what the consequence is, be mindful that may have been the thing. Like for me, I had to try the potatoes 3 or 4 times to really feel pretty solid that, hey, it was the potatoes, it wasn't something else. And I'm stubborn, so that's just how it works for me. But that's how I look at it. Expansion and consolidation. Build it into your plan. People ask me what my carnivore diet's like, and I always say, first off, look, I eat what I want and when I want. So I want you to understand it. If I choose to go, if I want, if somebody brings in a gyro sandwich, I don't know if it's the Greek, with the gyro meat and the tzatziki and the vegetables and the pita bread. I mean, that's one of I love that. If I want to eat that, I'll eat that. Okay, that's my choice. I'm still hyper carnivore. I'm still eating, 70 greater than 75, percent of my food is meat, but I'm going to live with the consequence of how that makes me feel. So anyways, I really want to drive into people's minds. Don't set unrealistic goals for yourself. Have that built into the plan. That's my take on it.
That's a great answer. What I always tell people is that quick recoveries. With other words, if you ate off plan, let's say there was a birthday and you had cake or whatever the case might be, or even if some guys go off plan completely. I never went off plan. I never ate anything, like vegetables and things like that. But but some people do, and then they ask me, but what now? And I always tell them, come back quickly to what, it's like you said, come back to what helped you before. You know what helped you before.
Yeah.
And quick recoveries, I call it quick recoveries. Recover quickly. It does not matter how many times you fall off the wagon, it's how many times you stay on the wagon. But what guys do wrong, like you said before, is they beat themselves up and they become negative and then they become depressed and all of that. It's a vicious cycle. Yeah. In South Africa, we've got, in our group at least, we call Ketovore. It's about 10 grams of carbohydrates per day. And then we call Carnivore. It's completely carnivore. And then, of course, the keto diet. And then, of course, the very strict lion diet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And I tell people always, it depends on what you want to achieve. Some people need to cut out more carbohydrates. Some people need to cut out even eggs or dairy, It depends on your situation, what's your inflammation levels and what you want to achieve. I know people like, for instance, Brett Lloyd, that you know. He will not put a sweet thing in his mouth. Does not matter what it is, because of also suffering from depression. But he know how detrimental that sweet taste will be affecting him. Sure, Eric, I'm so grateful for this interview, man. I think I've got almost all the questions. Let me see if I've missed a question or two. Do you eat a lot of salt or not?
I don't go out of my way to add salt. I will salt my steaks. But that's about it. I don't add any salt to my water. I know some people do that, but I keep it pretty moderate. I don't have I do love the flavor of salt on fat. It's one of the best flavors in the steak. But yeah, I coat my steaks all the way around with a little bit of salt. But if I don't have it, because there are times when I forget, it doesn't bother me.
Yes,
so.
I've done a 3-week stint of not eating salt at all, 0 salt. Not eating salt. But then I felt I needed salt again, and I started to salt lightly. But what I've learned from this Dr. David Perlmutter is he mentioned a study that was done where if you eat excessive salt, within 5 days you can become insulin resistant. I try to not eat too much salt, apart from the hypertensive part as well. Oh,
I was going to say, speaking of hypertension, so in 2017, I found my blood pressure was as high as, highest one was 163 over 102. And my most recent blood pressure I just checked at work the other day was 119 over 79.
Wow.
So that's pretty significant. Like I said, as far as when people ask the question, is the carnivore diet healthy? I'm seeing everything going in the right direction. And yet I'm hearing the message that, well, your ApoB and your LDL and your cholesterol levels are going to be through the roof, and this is going to cause this and that. I just have a hard time believing that that's true. You know, and maybe it is. It is, but I would imagine that all of the good things that we're doing are balancing that out somehow. It's got to be better than what I was doing before.
Yes, yes. I managed to reverse my hypertension with the carnivore diet within 2 months. I'm 3 years and 6 months on the carnivore diet now. Within 2 months, my hypertension was gone. Fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease was gone.
Yeah.
And I managed to lose 12 kilos that I needed to lose. That's all that I had to lose. But later on, so my blood pressure was normal for quite a long time. But then I started to eat too much salt on the carnivore diet. But I mean excessive salt.
Oh, yeah.
And then I managed to get my blood pressure up again.
Yeah.
So insulin resistance, of course, upregulates your salt retention. So
Right.
that's why I didn't know why this happened, but I just knew my blood pressure was too high. But when I cut out the salt, within a week, my blood pressure is normal again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but then I find salt is beneficial, of course, also.
You know, on the subject of stalling, weight stalling, and insulin resistance, being on a ketogenic diet causes a physiological insulin resistance. So that's basically a glucose-sparing insulin resistance. So that because you're in a low glucose, so because your diet doesn't have a lot of sugar, your body's creating the sugar, and that's an expensive mechanism for your body to be putting that effort in. So it basically shunts all of the glucose to the brain, the red blood cells, and the organs that need it the most, leaving the other organs to run on glucose or on fat and ketones. So what some people do is called carb cycling, and you can do carb cycling with a carnivore diet by either increasing your protein so that you get more carbohydrate into your blood through gluconeogenesis, or you can find dairy products that have a higher rate, you know, more carbohydrates in them. And so when you get a higher blood glucose reading, it turns down the physiological glucose sparing effect, and it can make your cells a little more glucose sensitive. And so some people will carb cycle and find that just a few cycles of carb cycling can kind of get them through a plateau and bring the blood sugar down a little bit. But you know, that's something you would have to choose. Do you want to add carbohydrates to your meal, you know, to your diet or not? Because those excursions for some people could really be difficult to manage, the cravings that come with that, you know, or the pattern that could come with that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Eric, I think we must wrap it up, my friend.
Yes,
we
sir.
are almost an hour on the go, and I enjoyed it so much, and I've learned so much from you, and I will still learn a lot from you. So thank you for doing this interview.
It's been mutual. Cobus, thanks so much for having me.
That's a big pleasure. Where can people find you on social media? Where are you at?
Yeah, so most of my handles are changing over to Regenarian, so like regenerative agriculture, but like vegetarian, so Regenarian. So on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I have a Facebook page, so I'm on all those platforms. I post somewhat different content on each one. It's not all just trying to do the same stuff. Twitter is where I do more of the debating and discussions that help me learn. So you'll see a lot of strange topics on there. But yeah, I would say my favorite one right now is TikTok. I'm really starting to like the platform.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.